Vampires, those soul-slurping, evil fang mothersuckers. Some explode, some implode, but all will try to take you out with them. Vampire stories have been around for generations, to the point where they predate all known forms of media. Of course, the settings and rules change from time to time, but I think it's safe to say that vampires have had a pretty significant impact on our collective global culture. We've used these fictional creatures as a stand-in for our own social anxiety and desires for centuries. Of course, I've only been around since the 80s, so my exposure to the vampire mythology has primarily been through video games, television, and film. Unlike my previous top 5 lists, in this case I have a massive list of media to choose from, and as always, I'll only be speaking from my own personal exposure and taste. This means that many classic vampire films that predate the span of my lifetime won't be mentioned in the list, but will be used as a guide to identifying vampiric traits, which means that there won't be any daywalkers or sparklers invited to the party either. So, here are the ground rules. Firstly, vampires aren't immortal. They can be killed by a stake through the heart or sunlight, and perhaps some more creative avenues, but they generally aren't affected by age and have fangs as well as a wide variety of enhanced abilities. They spread vampirism through their bite, mostly preying on humans, drinking their blood to sustain themselves. They can range from deeply conflicted and sympathetic characters struggling to hold on to their humanity, to brainless killing machines. As far as other points of classic vampire lore, I'm a bit more liberal. Weakness to holy symbols, garlic, silver, and running water are prevalent in vampire lore, but I feel these aren't essential traits that need to be referenced. Also, because this list is about vampire movies in general, the big D will not be included. Now that we've established the guidelines for vampiric standards and practices, let's dive into my top 5 vampire movies. Number 5, 30 Days of Night. Based on a graphic novel of the same name, 30 Days of Night centers around the secluded Alaskan town of Barrow as it's overrun by vampires during a polar night lasting a month. The premise and setting is perfect. The small frozen town giving the feeling of isolation reminiscent of the horror classic The Thing, as residents struggle to survive the seemingly never-ending night. The human characters seem very organic and likable, which makes the horror elements all the more impactful. Number 4, From Dusk Till Dawn. A pair of criminals on the run abduct a preacher and his family and hold them hostage in order to cross the border to Mexico. The group arrives at a biker bar named the Titty Twister, which turns out to be a massive vampire den. This one is less about the horror and more about the body count and crotch-mounted machine guns. I love this movie for its over-the-top characters and special effects, as well as its unconventional narrative. Number 3, John Carpenter's Vampires. A badass Vatican-sanctioned vampire slayer named Jack Crow and his partner pursue a vampire who killed their team. Along with a preacher, they uncover a plot that could shift the balance in favor of vampires once and for all. Of course, badass James Woods ain't having none of that. Number 2, Interview with the Vampire / Queen of the Damned. Okay, so maybe I'm cheating a little letting them both take the number 2 slot. These films are both based on the Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles series of novels. The two films are connected by the character Lestat, who in Interview with the Vampire is a mentor to a recently turned plantation owner who struggles to keep his humanity. In Queen of the Damned, Lestat becomes a rock star, and it's awesome. It was also the final acting role of the immensely talented Aaliyah before her untimely death. Unlike previous entries in this list, these films focus less on body count and more on character development and drama, doing so in a more mature way than more recent efforts. Number 1, The Lost Boys. The Lost Boys centers around two brothers, Mike and Sam, as they adjust to moving into Santa Clara, which, go figure, happens to be infested with vampires. After Michael is tricked into becoming a vampire, Sam turns to local vampire hunters to slay the head vampire and free his brother of its curse. This film hits all the right notes. The imagery, the soundtrack, the acting, everything works so well in this film to the extent that even over 25 years later, it still kicks every other vampire movie's ass by far. So that's my top 5 vampire movies. Of course, this is based solely on my opinion, and I suspect there are more than a few people whose lists would be different. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think the best vampire films are, and why? Once again, this was Fade Dragon Tier. Happy Halloween.
But I still believe, through the pain, through the grief, through the light, through the storms, through the cry.